Fire Radio.
Hey everybody, it's Rob, National Fire Radio with Frontline Mindset. Here today with a good friend of mine, Chief Larry DiCamillo, who is the chief in Stafford, Texas, and also the owner and operator of Seaside Consultants. We're going to talk about training today and the mindset that goes with it. And Larry, how are you?
I'm good, man. I cannot complain. We got through budget time, so now it's just the good part of the year.
Awesome. So, Larry, for those who don't know you, kind of just give us a brief overview because I know there's so much more to you and your career than just what I described in the intro.
I started as a volunteer when I was 18 years old, I guess, so 35-ish years ago here in Stafford when we were a completely volunteer department. 2 years later, I got on with the Houston Fire Department, and then I was in both places. I retired from HFD as a ladder company chauffeur from Station 68 in 2020. Coincidentally on the anniversary date of our 27th year as a cadet class starting. So that was nice. And I've been the fire chief here in the city of Stafford now for, going on 17, 18 years. And we've grown the organization to now we're a predominantly paid department career, and we still utilize part-time personnel. But so we've gone through the evolutionary process of evolving the department. And so I've got to see both sides of it when I was in HFD, being a line firefighter on the truck, as well as the opposite side when I came to Stafford, having the admin portion. So I got to see both of that, and I like to think that that was a good opportunity to learn what I would do and what I wouldn't do, and what I would apply and what I wouldn't apply. And so that's where I am now. And then Seaside kind of came about a couple of years ago, quite honestly, because my passion in the fire service has always been aerial operations. I think that they're a make or break resource on the fire ground. And quite honestly, a lot of times and HFD was no exception, it became an afterthought because we were such an aggressive fire department in Houston that it was always just get in there and get after it. And so we started to see coordinated attack slip in my time because we had reed hoods. We wore double liners in our coats. We did everything that the NFPA would flip out about just because, we got in further faster. And so coordinated fire attack with ventilation started to slip. And so what's the cornerstone of vertical ventilation, at least in an urban, engine truck concept? It's always going to be the truck. So we as a station decided to start splitting left and right on the truck. And we really started to emphasize, the right side goes inside, the left side chunks ladders and goes to the roof. And then if nothing else to do, then everybody goes up and we get the hole faster. And so that was kind of my thing. And then a lot of times in our area in particular, we were heavily garden apartments. So a ground ladder is great to get to a roof, but it's a hell of a lot easier if you have a better climbing angle and you can get a hydraulically powered aerial up there. So we've started emphasizing aerial apparatus positioning as a district, us in 51s. And then it just kind of metastasized from there to where a class that I put together turned out to be the Academy asked for it to be used as the Department CE to emphasize apparatus positioning. And it just kind of grew from there. And so hence me starting Seaside with an emphasis on aerial operations.
And full disclosure for everybody out there, Larry was hired by my employer to come up here and teach, do his class with us, and it was important for us to have an outside instructor come in. And I want Larry just to, if you don't mind hitting on that real quick too. We talked about that 100-mile rule.
Are you talking about the 100-mile rule?
Yeah.
Yeah, and the 100-mile rule, it's kind of it's a tongue-in-cheek comment, but it's true. A lot of times and we do it here, is we'll bring in somebody, like we're bringing in Dave Quick, the hose nerd, at, middle of the year to do standpipe operations for us because we've got very qualified people. But oftentimes you can find somebody who knows as much or a little more, but because they're coming from someplace else, that independent third-party validation of what you're doing or correction is extremely important. It tends to gather the attention of the students better, and it also, it just adds some semblance of credibility to it. Specific to when Dave's coming out and Kevin Brumley from Denver, they're all coming out, and so I think what you see is that it's different perspectives, it's different opinions. I think you saw that firsthand with Rosenbauer. That truck, I'm not what you would call one with a lot of experience with Rosenbauer products. We had a Rosenbauer pumper, but no aerial. Aerials are all the same, physics apply all the same, but just, and the specifics. And quite honestly, it comes down to, it's a confidence builder. I put ladder trucks in places where a lot of people say you're not supposed to do that, but realistically, if we allow the if we allow what you think the truck can and can't do, you there? Yeah. If you allow your apparatus to dictate what you're going to do on the fire ground, then you're automatically two steps behind. So I'm a big fan of learn what the truck can and can't do. Know its parameters, and then let it be an asset on the fire ground for what you're going to do, specific to where you need it.
Just writing it down because I like that
Yeah,
idea of that. Um, a lot of times people buy an apparatus and and it should actually happen all the time, I guess, right? But like there's training that comes from the factory, and like for our new ladder truck in Fairview, we got the ladder training from Rosenbauer. Um, but like, what's the difference? It just kind of like let's break down the difference a little bit of what the
sure.
training between what you're doing with Seaside Consultants versus what Rosenbauer is doing with their factory rep coming out to explain operations of the truck.
Well, I'll switch it a little bit. My experience, obviously, we're a Pierce department, just for frame of reference, and
Hmm.
so I can speak to what their factory training is. Their factory representatives will come down, and a lot of times they're covering systems, they're covering components, they're covering fluids, the do's and the don'ts. This is the rated capacity of this and that. It's not operational field training. And the single biggest thing that you get with an outside, and this is all from the perspective and framed about aerial operations, uh, is you want to apply that device in your community. You want to know what it can and can't do, where it can go, where it can't go, what its limitations are. And so the factory training is very important. It's very beneficial, to understand the rig itself. But the factory representatives are not going to, go out there and show you how to build a box crib for your outriggers, or to go deploy it below grade, how to rig up a hasty Stokes basket evolution based upon the stuff that we did with y'all, just with what you had on the rig, right? Again, we have to understand that it's a tool, and you're only limited. I call it a Swiss Army knife. A truck can do a lot of things. It's not just for suppression. It's not just for access. It's not just for rescue. It's, we used an aerial in Georgia a few weeks ago with FAST, to help extricate a firefighter scenario from a basement. And we used the aerial to do that, even though we just stuck it to the front door and and rigged up a pulley system. And why are you going to break guys' backs coming up a spiral staircase when you can have the smoothness and the efficiency and the hydraulics actually do it for you? And so there's a lot of applications. So the, the factory will never teach that, and it's quite honestly, it's not in their wheelhouse. They're there to tell you what the truck can and can't do by their designs, in terms of, the on the road, this is how you drive it, this is how you operate it, don't do this, do that. And while it's beneficial, it's not the whole enchilada. And the enchilada part, to me, 90% of it is getting it in your community, showing where you can. We went to some places in your community, I mean, Marist College, we set it up on that grade. Most people will tell you you're supposed to face it uphill, but we talked about our rationale by doing it downhill, just to where we maintain the braking efficiency. And that's not something that factory training is going to cover.
Yeah, I want to see if I can do something real quick. Just share
Sure.
my screen here, Larry. Um, all right, we have because I have a couple photos here. This is let me just get this one out of the way.
Yeah, that's when we did that hasty Stokes basket thing, just based upon what was on the rig.
Right. And so some people might look at this and see that the truck's in a little bit of an odd position with the angle here. What just kind of what's going on?
I mean, quite honestly, if we'd have kept all the wheels on the ground, you're only going to get so much below grade range of motion, even off the back end of the apparatus. So what you do, quite honestly, is, it's nothing but physics. It's nothing but geometry, as I call it. And fortunately, I was good at geometry in high school. And so what it comes down to is that if you lift the front end, you're obviously going to get a lowering effect of the turntable, which allows you to have a lower deflection rate for the aerial off the back end. And now, is this an everyday application? Absolutely not. But if you've got somebody below grade that's not ambulatory, you're going to have to Stokes up, or you're going to have to do some kind of rope evolution. Quite honestly, this truck is perfectly capable of doing it. That truck in particular has a torque box the size of a destroyer. And so that truck is perfectly capable of doing it. And quite honestly, we could have gone more if we'd have box cribbed underneath the front outriggers and literally, got greater deflection. But we were able to make the stretch with the aerial. And if you recall, I mean, we used, I think, some webbing that we had on that truck, and we were able to come up with a raising or an extrication methodology that worked, and we were able to get the Stokes and the theoretical patient out. So we
which
were just going for extra deflection.
right, and which for our department was something that we have not done before. So it was good to see that even with the tools, because like people thought, there's a misconception that we needed to buy a boatload of new equipment. Let me see if we can.
I'm all for buying new equipment, but a lot of times we just don't know what we have and how we can use it in different applications. And that's the fire service writ large.
Right. Here is the photo of Marist College, I believe. Is
That's a
what.
good picture.
So what? This was a problem area in our district because the grade we couldn't set up with the previous truck before this way, and we would pull in this way. So kind of talk us through this, Larry, about what we had here and what we were kind of doing.
I don't know the exact grade, but it was pretty severe. And so I'm a big believer in do everything in your direction of travel that you can and minimize the number of movements you're going to have to make on the fire ground once you get there. And with this obviously being the first and aerial device for this particular target hazard, what the goal was to keep them in their direction of travel. Had we had to go past this, turn around, do a 3 or 4 point turn to get back up to be facing uphill, we lose time, which means the benefit to the citizens, it's being delayed. And so the whole goal here is that was the direction of travel through the main gate, if you recall. So what we did is y'all said that was a target hazard to hit those 3 or 4 dorm buildings. So what we did, quite honestly, is we stopped it there. We went with the front outriggers first to get as much elevation as possible. And that way it only required the minimum on the rear. So while we're going through that setup, we're maintaining the friction and any braking efficiency from the chassis brakes while we're going through that setup. And then on the rears, outriggers, we only came up enough to get the weight onto the outriggers while still maintaining contact. And so then we were able to fly it. And that Rosenbauer requires you with, I believe it's being within 5 degrees of level. And we were within that margin, and we were able to get the aerial up and reach our objectives. But it was one of those things where this is a perfect example of a confidence builder. I know you said that it was a target hazard for y'all when we went up there the first day. And so we definitely wanted to go here and show, look, it can be done. Plus, if this didn't work, our second option is in the natural direction of travel, which was to beach it in the front yard to the left of the picture. And then we try and make the stretch that way. So again, that would have required, okay, this doesn't work, turn the wheel, put it in the yard, we beach it, we short jack the non-deployed side, and we can still hit the objectives. But again, it removes the time and the steps for a 3 or 4 point turn to reposition the apparatus.
And if we were to use like the E1 in this position, where we couldn't, because I think one of the things too, like, can we talk about the box cribbing real quick? Because that was something that
Sure.
like I had seen pictures of it but didn't understand. Could we
Right.
have box cribbed the underslung jacks of the E1 to give us the I don't know if lift is the right way but to increase that
To level it
deflection?
out?
Yeah.
In this scenario, yeah, and you could have done that because on that particular E1 y'all have, I love that aerial, that model, and the underslung jacks. I think the max jack spread on that thing is like 13 feet 8 inches because we had a similar outrigger system for Ladder 68 for years, 2 different iterations. Super simple to use. The problem is it's not short jack friendly. You have to hit the overrides, and that's something that I don't encourage doing. But yeah, the E1 could do this, but if you'll recall from a previous scenario training that we did, the E1 would not be the particular best application here because remember, over by one of the other houses, we had to get it sideways
Mm-hmm.
in the street. And so, yeah, you can do it with anything. And what you would do is you would simply just box crib underneath the outriggers to give you that extra vertical lift on the front to try and get it as level as possible.
Pauses
I think
for
you may have some pictures of some of the box cribbing, and that
yeah.
was, that's something that we all carry cribbing on trucks, right? Or at least we should. And so realistically, I mean, even a 2-layer of 4x4s, I think every contact point between a 4x4 and another 4x4 is about between 4,500 and 6,000 pounds per crossing point. So when you look at a 4-layer and a 4-layer on top, that's a lot of weight it will support.
This is our box cribbing that we were, when you were
Yeah,
initially, and then we ditched the plastic box cribbing.
absolutely. And that was the best thing y'all did, and y'all were so efficient with it. I mean, plastic is great. It doesn't absorb fluids on an accident scene. It's resistant. It'll be around longer than the earth will. The downside is that you don't get any bite. You want to use softwood, you don't want to use hardwood. Wood has got the huge advantage in that it'll bite in, and that it has very low tendency to slip. And so something like this, wood would be ideal. I think this was day one, day two, but when we came in that morning, y'all already had everything cut and fit in the compartments, and we were good to go with it. But yeah, wood is definitely the preferred material to use. But again, the premise is the same. Is your box cribbing there if you're trying to work around a curb, if you're trying to work around a parking space block, or if you're just doing something for that extra vertical reach?
Yep, here we go. This was the wood cribbing.
Yeah, and
Actually,
then we
and
use wood.
this just really quick, like I want you to explain the scenario here because there was a video I put up on TikTok. You did very well, but people were
Yep.
confused because you said something about box cribbing the. Um, well, yeah, I'll let you talk about it because I'm going to screw it up if I try
Oh
you
yeah,
know
because I said box to tandem, because I said crib to tandem.
right.
But because a lot of times I forget, and what we were doing, I think we had both trucks going for the below grade shot,
Correct.
and the E1 was over in the parking lot side where you already showed that picture. This one was on the highway side, and so what we were trying to do is obviously that's the deployed side, so you got to go all the way out to get full use of your aerial. And so what we did is I mean, obviously we cribbed that because we were getting on the edge of the concrete into the dirt. And so we wanted to have a stable foundation. And I think we used 4 and 4 as the base. Then we put the plate down on top of it. And then we went up vertical. And now some of the confusion was going to be, okay, well, how do we get our cribbing down? And so what the thing was is that I think I made the comments like, our comment, it's like Jenga. So realistically, is if you throw another 4x4 underneath your tandem axles, and then you raise up your outriggers, you get your cribbing out, then you can retract the jack in and then drop it down, and you can get your cribbing out from underneath your tandems pretty easily. It's aerial operations is geometry, man. It's going to be all about understanding perspective, reach, load, and everything else, and how it all comes together.
Just trying to see, Larry, if I had a picture of that's going to be you talking really loud. If I had a
Yeah.
picture of the street side,
Uh, yeah.
I did not.
I want to say there. No, I think I've got a picture of it actually on the street side. I want to say it was Jason that was doing it, and I want to say they went. I think they went all the way out, which and that's another topic too. Short jacking or alley jacking versus full deployment.
And there's one other thing that I want to just kind of share here real quick because this is I know we're going to jump back into the conversation about the training aspect of it, but this one picture here was something that we had to make an adjustment to.
Oh yeah.
So, what do we got going on here, Larry? For those who don't might
Well,
be
this was day two, and I think that we had worked it out with the city of Poughkeepsie, so we went into the city. And we found this actually going back to the hotel after day one. And what it was, it's a narrow throat shot between two multifamily dwellings. And the scenario was that you had victims in Division 2 windows and Division 3 windows on the left of the picture. And so what we wanted to emphasize was, there may be times where aerials have to work in close proximity. If you look at Boston, they do it every day. It's a requirement based upon their geography, their building construction type, etc. And so in this particular application, one of the things we first saw that night when we got in was the tip lights on the aerial. They stuck out about, I don't know, call it 1.5 feet, 2 feet on each side. And so in this application, the ability to get it to the window on Division 2 or Division 3 is fine, but then you can't close the gap. And one of the biggest things that will cause fireman injury or, God forbid, worse is if you increase the level of difficulty unnecessarily. And so the closer we can get that aerial to the window to minimize that gap, uh, the better off we'll be. And unfortunately, these floodlights prevented that. I know that y'all have since taken those off, which I think is awesome. And so this scenario, again, in the same building, same application, you'd be able to really, really narrow that gap to be able to, especially when you're dragging a citizen out. If you're dragging a civilian out into an aerial, first of all, they don't want to get on the aerial. It's always going to be at night. It's going to be cold. Their building or their house is on fire, and they're going to be hesitant to say the least. So if you can minimize that gap, they build a little bit of confidence. And a lot of times, if they're unconscious, you can just drag them and manhandle them on there, and you don't have to worry about, is that space big enough for them to fall through? Should I, let go or lose my grip?
yeah. We have just so for context of what we were doing there for everybody. This was like I said, we were going right over top the other ones. We came up underneath. Why? I mean, there's Mark pointing and doing all the work. But no, no,
Mark's
Larry
an
was,
ace.
yeah, Mark was
Mark's
there.
an ace.
And this was a dead end street. So, and and I know some people may watch this and look at the photo here and say, well, why not just use a ground ladder? There are parts in the city of Poughkeepsie where this is bricked right over. So, how are you going to get to ground? Like the hydraulic option may be the only option to access that
Yeah,
alleyway because,
and this scenario was a no-win situation. We did it on purpose,
yeah,
and there's a way to do it. It just comes down to, and this was strictly for the confidence builder portion. If you recall, this was the end of day two, and we
yeah,
took both groups out there. And the whole point was getting people close to having aerials work next to each other, and at the same time too hitting different objectives in close proximity, and letting and really emphasizing we've got to leave room for the second aerial, because our the best laid plans of mice and men. And so the first truck 90% of the time works fine, but if it has a mechanical, if you've got a victim that shows up on division 3, and so that this was a confidence part of getting people used to working close to each other, emphasizing the hand signals and the coordinations between the different aerial operators, because that's a big thing. That's probably one of the most important thing that's never spoken about. Those operators have to be in sync, and they have to understand what the other one is doing now and where they're probably going to go next. And so it's very, very important that they understand that. And the military uses the term deconfliction. And quite honestly, that's what this was to do. What was to emphasize, deconfliction, working together, still reaching our objectives.
and the um ultimate, so like as so we can go back to other photos later, but the if I go in the right direction, that will also help. Ultimately, this was, you know, a couple weeks after you left, we end up here
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
where we're
Jason sent me those pictures.
where we're spotting the aerial appropriately, getting the rear of the structure where the tower ladder 2 is up front, and the guys are going to work. So
Absolutely. And that's what it's all about. I mean, is you want your people to have the confidence, and confidence comes with knowing what the rig will and won't do, and then putting it in the right position, willing to think outside the box, and getting the crew to where they need to go.
yeah. So, going back to it, like I think that we've kind of, what are some of the pitfalls that you see out there when people are purchasing new apparatus that they, and I don't want to say like shameless plug to Seaside Consulting, right? But like seriously, there's a benefit for having you or somebody else come out here and do these confidence builders. Like what is it that you're seeing? I know I've seen you do work in Texas before where you were showing some
Sure.
people about their mid-mount Ascendant. I
Mm-hmm.
I like the truck, I like the product, but there was and I don't even want to say it wasn't so much a flaw as it was something to be aware of. Like, what are some of the things that you're seeing, as you're doing this that people are missing or,
Well, there's a couple of things to answer your question. It's probably a 3 or 4 part answer. First and foremost, you'd be surprised how many customers don't actually know what they're buying or why they're buying it. They know they need a ladder truck, and they become brand loyal instead of device for their community loyal. And so a lot of times they'll stick with the brand just because we've always bought that brand, and that's fine. I get brand loyalty, but at the end of the day, while everybody makes a very, very useful product in the American market today, because that I don't have any European experience. Hopefully one day. But as it stands right now, is that a lot of people really don't know what they're buying and how to use it, and so the second part of that is that then they get caught up with keeping up with the Joneses. You've got a lot of departments. Certain parts of this country are very bad about buying something because their neighbor has one, so they try and one up them. Um, and it seems like then you've got a plethora of the same type of device all within 8 or 10 communities of each other, and they're all redundant. There's no complementary capabilities. And I'll tell you all day long, it's easier to move people out of a building on a straight stick ladder than it is on a tower. Now, the advantage of a tower obviously is master stream applications, and you can manhandle and take an unconscious non-ambulatory a lot easier, a lot safer. But when all things equal, for ambulatory people out of a multiple dwelling or a hotel or office building, you're going to move more people with an aerial. So that's why I always say, have complementary capabilities. A neighboring department to where we are has a tower, and we run sticks. Not to say that they're both not useful for master stream application, but I guarantee you, push comes to shove, we can move more people. And again, it comes down to your jurisdiction. And a lot of people really don't look at what their jurisdiction infrastructure will supply. We have outstanding water supply, one of the highest water supply grades in the state of Texas. So we've got hydrants every 300 feet. So we have the ability to be able to run 2,000 GPM pumps. We can do oversized waterways. We can do all of these capabilities because our infrastructure will supply it. What makes no sense to me is when a community says they have to have a 2,000 GPM pump, but yet they don't oversize the waterway, or they put two monitors on a platform, when in reality their waterway will only supply one. And then even if they could supply two, their water supply in the ground won't allow them to supply two because it just doesn't exist. And so we spend a lot of money on specifications for $15,000, $20,000 monitors times two, when your waterway, while it may supply them, at the end of the day, you're never going to get it out of the ground to make use of it. So why spend the money on the first place or in the first place to buy them, then to maintain them? And so there's just a lot of things in that regard that people just really, I think some departments don't think through, but you've got some departments that are totally dialed in. They understand their infrastructure, they understand their target hazards, their building construction, how they're going to apply the device. And quite honestly, I think you run into, the Quint concept hurts us as a fire service. The Quint concept is we try and put everything into one box, and we expect everything in that one box. And the term Quint implies 5 capabilities, right? Well, unless you're running the staffing to do all 5 capabilities simultaneously, then it's an illusion.
Yeah.
And so realistically, there are Quint departments that are very successful with it, but they're very structured and they're very regimented. And then you've got other departments that do it because it's a manpower limiter. It's a budget thing. And so as long as it works for you, there's no tried and true thing that I've seen. But, when it comes to spec in the rig, spec what you need, not what you want or not what the neighbors have.
Yeah, there. I mean, and I just think of like we building the new truck. We had the debate, and it went on for a little bit on the tower ladder versus the aerial, and or ladder tower, however, whatever terminology you want to use, right? But
Well, there's a difference.
and yeah, and ultimately we went with the aerial because of the ability to, I don't want to say point and shoot, but like and unfortunately for the department, there wasn't a whole lot of experience with tower ladders. I had to, I was fortunate enough to work on one for a brief amount of my, time in my career, and it's just like it's a separate skill set, especially when
Oh
you're
yeah.
not doing fires. But like, what are some of the other strong points of an aerial device versus the tower?
A lot of it comes down to, FDNY by far is the gold standard when it comes to using them both on the fire ground. If you look at it, the city of Boston, I think, runs 2 out of all their ladder companies.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else is straight sticks. The city of Houston has 5 for 625 square miles. And so realistically, the ladder tower provides a great capability. But at the same time, too, you have to figure out where it fits in. The city of Poughkeepsie runs a stick and a ladder tower, right? They've got good complementary capabilities. And I think that realistically, you can't pigeonhole either one and say this is the way you have to go. You have to look at your density. You have to look at your building construction, infrastructure, roadway width. And there's a lot of stuff where you can get some of these ladder towers that are absolute monsters. There's a big push for a certain brand down here in the Houston area by some departments. Because that's what FDNY runs. Oh, it's the gold standard. Okay, that's great. But realistically, in some of our apartment complexes in Southwest Houston, it would never fit, especially if you're trying to get a 100-foot to 100-foot, comparison device. It's just not going to fit. The tail swing is significantly larger than anything else. So that's a lot of things that you have to look at. You've got some cities that are height limited because of streets, old fire stations. You've got others that are weight limited on bridges. And, the minute you buy something that has to have a caveat on where you can take it, you probably should have hit pause and reassess what you need.
I like that. Mark it down as a clip. So I think that's something that people forget. One of the things that you did with us was that this training didn't happen in a parking lot.
No.
And one of the things that I know when we had demo units coming in was to get them out of the firehouse parking lot and into the street to see like what's What is the importance of that when you're building a truck and you're looking into this and then you're doing the training aspect of it is getting out of the fire station parking lot in the process because you're looking for certain takeaways as you're doing this.
Sure. We use apparatus committees. You use an apparatus committee. Most departments do. And so the apparatus committee is trying to figure out what is the best device that they're designing for application in their community. And what you find is that if you just do it on the apparatus, apron or out back or at the fire station property somewhere, or even a training academy, it's very isolated. It's a controlled environment. It's very sterile. You don't have your typical overhead power lines. You don't have your parked cars. You don't have all the other obstacles that at 3 in the morning you will have. So really, if you're assessing a demo or a particular manufacturer model, you got to get in the community. You got to find out, is it going to work as advertised for our application? And like we did, go pick a random house at the top of the hill. Can I get this aerial where I need to easily? Will it set up easily? And will I still be able to hit my objective? And so you've got to get out there because, not to name any names, but there's aerial apparatus that a salesman will tell you it'll do X, Y, and Z, and you find out it only does X and Y, and that the Z part is within a certain parameter. Part of the classroom, part of our class, is that everybody likes to say, oh, it'll flow this at zero, the full operational envelope of aerial operations from below grade to 70 degrees. Okay, that's fine. But then when you read the fine print, some of them will tell you, well, that's only for, our tip load is only above 40 or 45 degrees. Physics still matters. Gravity
Mhm.
still prevails. And at the end of the day, there's just certain dynamics, and that's why we beat it up in the classroom part. Center of gravity, stabilization, footprint, understanding the difference between stress and strain, understanding torsional twist, understanding all of that is very important. And the only way you're going to experience that is getting out of the fire station into your community and putting it where you may need to put it at 3 in the morning.
Yeah. Um, there's something on the tip of my tongue as you were talking to. Oh, the class. Kind of, if you don't mind, just for everybody, like break out the classroom portion and then like how you did, because I think that's another thing too is the setup of this. Like I said, it's not to be a shameless plug, but it's to help understand what you're getting. Because I think that there's this. Our commissioners, as an example, didn't understand why I wanted to hire you to come up from the city of Houston to New York to teach a class. So I laid the groundwork out, and then they were very much in my ear, not in a bad way, as you were up here. So like the. And by the way, you won them over on the hearts and minds of the commissioners. Like they're like, I can't wait to have this guy back. Everything else because
Good,
the membership was so fired up. Like it was really,
good.
but like that classroom portion, I think we've spent like a total of 2 hours maybe.
Yeah,
And that was just really because there were some questions that people
sure.
had, which is great because it was open communication. But kind of, kind of break down.
Excuse me.
Bless you. Kind of break that
Thank you.
down for us.
The classroom part, I think, is really important because you can have two yahoos from Texas that show up in upstate New York, and we can walk in the door and say, okay, let's go out here and throw this aerial around. And we can sling steel and aluminum all day long. And really, unless we at least talk about the basics. And so the way I came up with the class, and that's a class that I've refined over the last 5 or 6 years, 8 years maybe. And what it is that basically is we have to understand the different aerial types that NFPA recognizes. And there's 5 types. And so we cover that in the class. Then after that, obviously first and foremost, let me qualify that. Before that, as we talk about responder safety. That's why I have the videos in there of some accidents that have taken place around the country. It's a cautionary tale, but and the age-old saying, you can't help anybody if you don't get there. And so after that, we go into the aerial types. We give examples, the pros, the cons, what the NFPA requirements are. And then we really kind of want to talk about the physics. We want to talk about center of gravity. We want to talk about a stability footprint. We want to talk about stress and strain. We want to talk about live load and dead load because those are terms that we bandy around in the fire service when it comes to rigs. But when you look at a lot of firemen, they gloss over their eyes because it's going above them and they don't understand that. Stress is a force that's applied to a device, right? A strain is what occurs when that stress is applied. And most people use that term interchangeably. But on an aerial device, it's very important, depending upon the type of aerial device, aluminum versus steel. Y'all have a galvanized. Is it 100,000 psi steel? All of these things factor in. I've probably run into 5% of firemen that actually can tell you why the 2 to 1 safety factor for aerial devices is a 2 to 1 safety factor. And it comes down to NFPA saying that anything made out of ductile material, you can only rate to 50% of its maximum capacity. So your aerial device can be a 1,500, tip load aerial device all day long, but because of NFPA, they automatically take it down to 50% and make it 750, just hypothetically. And so most firemen don't understand that. And it's very important in the specification and the apparatus. That's why we cover that in the class. And then we get into the actual, as you would set up. We cover the approaches. You want the engine, if you're coming from the same direction to pull past, leave the front for the truck. Or if they're coming opposite directions, engine stop short, all the other stuff. We have a component in there that you'll recall about the engines just get out of the way. When I rode with Camden, New Jersey, they are so disciplined. The first engine that's going to be fighting fire, they're on the street. The rest of the engines stay out of the block because they want to get the special services in. They want the aerials, the towers. They want to be able to get the rescue up close if it's needed. And it's just it because it works for them, and it's a very dialed in methodology. So we cover the approaches in the class. Then we take it through the mechanics of. Once you've got it positioned where you want it, then at that stage of the game, then we talk about stabilization. We talk about the curbs. We talk about manholes. We talk about grates. We talk about parking blocks. We give pictures and examples because what we want to do is show that these are not all things that are just, defeatist ideas. There's a way to work around them if you understand how to do it safely and you understand the constraints of the rig you're working with. And then we go through actual applications, the 4 methodologies for what we're going to use an aerial device for. It's going to be fire attack, it's going to be rescue, it's going to be access, and it's going to be ventilation. And those are the 4 things you're going to use an aerial for. And then we cover what needs to be factored in and considered when you're going in for all of those. We cover scrub angle. Captain Dugan from FDNY has probably the best explanation of scrub because he goes all the way back to when it was invented, the term. And so, but when you get down to it, that's part of the positioning. That's part of the, do you nose it in? And then we touch on if you're in a mid mount, if you're in a rear mount, if, all of those things matter because you want to maximize your performance envelope. Do we turn the nose away from the objective, on a rear mount? On a mid mount, you got to get the side to the fire. All of those things are covered in the class with the pros and cons and the benefits and the negatives. We give examples of bad apparatus positioning where pumpers are blocking people out, where you've got people setting up on the edge of pavement and grass and then operating to that side with no additional stabilization support. And so there's a lot of things that we put into it and we've refined over the years to try and be as encompassing, open up their minds. I'm not trying to answer any questions really or convince them of anything, but open up their minds with the classroom part. So then when we go in the field and we apply it, they're receptive to it and they're like, okay, yeah, that does work.
I think too the other thing is you said about the mid mount and the rear mount.
Mm-hmm.
We're running currently my fire district has 2 rear mount aerial devices, but next door to us we have a mid mount tower, and then to the north of us we have a rear mount tower ladder or aerial platform, and just simply going over that opened up the eyes of, okay, if the ladder truck is out of service, I need to adjust my positioning like this. Even though we don't have the mid mount, we now know that the mid mounts around us need this space to operate on. They need, like, in order for them to
Absolutely.
be successful, we need to be here to allow them the option to be successful. And that was another win for us, just to to tag on to what you're talking about, because
Sure. And the mid mount rolling into your territory, you're going to have to rethink, as you pointed out, is you're going to have to rethink apparatus position. You're going to have to leave more room for that mid mount to get in there. Otherwise, especially if it's a particular brand, if you want them low elevation, they've got about 50 degrees of left to right at 0 degrees on one device. And so you've got to make sure that sweet spot is where you need it. And it takes discipline. And quite honestly, the best discipline in the world is reinforced by just doing it over and over again.
yeah, we've always said, I know it's been passed down as 1.5 buildings past the fire building is where you want to
Yeah,
stop the engine. And I even tell the guys, you can go a little bit further than that. We have the hose, we can stretch. We can't stretch the ladder.
absolutely. Nope.
So, and
Nope.
then after the classroom section, we go out into the streets, and like I mean, that is the bread and butter of what we're doing here. And I thought it was really unique how you guys, like, essentially, are buffs. So you drove through the fire area to see where the work would be, and
Mhm.
then came up with the objectives of like, all right, this is where we're going. I mean, we provided some that we were concerned with,
Absolutely.
but like, just talk about the practical application, because that's I mean, I watched my members go from like being not confident with this new ladder to now like embracing it. Like, I know how I can operate this. Like I said, like it's like watching a new gun student pick up a gun for the first time and not knowing
Right.
how to shoot, versus like after I'm done with 8 hours of training, like they're like, yeah, I can load this thing, I can unload it, and I can point it at a paper plate 7 yards away, and I can put all my rounds within that 8-inch paper plate. Like that confidence is just there, and they had it.
Well,
Like,
good, good. And then we accomplished something then because that's what the goal is. We don't want to leave with you going, I didn't pick anything up out of that, or that was a waste of time and money. You know, our validation on it being a beneficial presentation is your feedback. And, I think I reached out to you, a day or two later and said, hey, what's the feedback? Because I want to know, is there something that we need to improve on? Is there something we need to de-emphasize, something we need to emphasize? And so it's just about improving the product, because if I'm expected to walk in the door and be able to teach people how to use their aerial apparatus, I need to know how my presentation can be better, more informative, more complete. And so the feedback from you, the customer, is extremely important. But to your question about in the community, I mean, part of what we do is we find places that are going to be challenging. Not necessarily where you're going to make fires, because y'all are good at that, right? If you go to the same neighborhood because you're always making fires there, you understand the challenges of that neighborhood. However, if you find something that's an extreme challenge, like we did over at one of the colleges, when we were having to, back down an alleyway and all the rest of that, those are going to be the places you don't go to very often, but it's going to require an extremely refined skill set and confidence level to be able to get in where you fit in when you got one chance to do it. And so those are the ones that we look for, are those challenging areas. But at the same time, too, also want to cover your most common hazards. Your power line issue is completely, usually different than what I'm used to. But as you saw, there's ways to defeat it, right? When we had those two houses, and they put the E1 uh, in the grass on the sidewalk to shoot underneath the power lines because they got in, part of the enemy, and it's the old thing, you keep your friends close and your enemies closer. But realistically, the same thing applies to power lines, right? If you can get that turntable sucked up underneath the power lines or past them, in between the objective and the power lines, then you can do it all day long. And then the second truck comes in, because that's something else too. You always have to prepare every fire ground for more than one aerial device. So the second truck came in and he shot it from a completely opposite place past one house, and he still hit the objective. That was outside the box thinking. That's what we not only want to encourage, but we want to reinforce when you see it. Now, granted, Jason was probably the wrong person to pat on the back as loudly as I did, because he'll never let you hear the end of it. But it was a good application of the principles. It didn't crowd the front of the building. We got multiple areas from multiple sides, and we were able to hit the objective. So part of it is, you want to hit the target hazards, you want to hit the challenges, but you also want to work with the typical restraints y'all have. And in your case, it's going to be grades and elevations and power lines.
yeah. No, it was. I think my only comment to you about the class was, I was like, "Hey, like slide 26, you need to change the colors. It's a little too contrasting."
Yeah,
That's the
yeah, I
one.
think so.
But no, it was very, very good. It was, like I said, we're planning on having you back. And Mark was, fantastic as well. He
Oh,
paid.
Mark's an ace. And he and I worked at 68s together, and then I was fortunate enough to lure him out here to be one of our lieutenants. And Mark's a natural born truck guy. He's got the wingspan of a 747. He builds houses on the side, so he understands building construction. And he's just a natural truck officer. And he's an outstanding fireman and a good human being to boot.
Yeah. What else are we missing here, Larry? We've almost been going for 45 minutes. Is it? I mean, have we covered? I mean, I think we've
I mean,
covered the bases, but
I
like,
think we talked about something earlier about, before we started recording, about, picking your instructors and stuff.
yes, yeah,
And
yeah.
it,
Thank you.
and what we're running into a lot of now, I say running into, I don't see myself competing with anybody. Uh, Not that I know everything, but at the end of the day, I think that there has to be a certain dynamic that works between the instructors slash company and a prospective client. I think that you have to have credibility in what you're teaching. You can't just have gone to a class the day before or the week or the month before and then go out and start teaching it yourself the next month. I think that there has to be some application on the fire ground, because not only does that build credibility, but it allows you to broaden your own experience base to understand, because you are always going to find a situation, whether, we'll be down in McAllen and Far next month, or when we were out, I was out in Georgia a couple weeks after y'all. And there's always going to be those dynamics, but if you have a wide enough experience base, you can come up with ways to work with it and work around it and still reach your objective. And part of that just comes from you've got to have experience doing it. And so I think that there are some extremely good companies out there right now. Nick Esposito from Truck Tactics is huge. He's extremely good with that stuff. And you've got a lot of people out there, just using him as an example, that has good material, but be cautious of social media. There's a lot of people out there. I say a lot. There's a number of people out there that push out phenomenal social media, which I'm horrible at. But realistically, vet who you're hiring. Ray McCormick says it all the time. You got to vet these guys. If Ray McCormick's going to come down here and tell me how to do hose lines, I'm going to listen all day long, because he has the street credibility, he has the experience, he has that reputation in that respect. Not to say that other people don't, but in the absence of coming from FDNY or being a Ray McCormick or Mike Dugan or Mickey Farrell, who is legitimate, who understands the job, does the job. You just got to make sure that who you're getting not only knows what they're talking about, but that they're a good fit for your organization. I've seen some instructors come in and they're completely arrogant. They talk down to the students. And by the end of the class, there's such animosity and acrimony that they're like, why did we even waste the time? Now, fortunately, it's few and far between, but you hear the horror stories. And at the same time, too, as a company, you have to understand you're not going to get every gig. You're going to have people that always go to the same training cadre because they're comfortable with them, they like them, they have a rapport. That's great. It's nothing personal. And when you get down to it, there's a lot of startup companies in the opposite perspective that are really, really good, that have a lot of experience, that are just now, coming on the scene. And I consider myself, a neophyte when it comes to all this, because I've only been doing it as a company for a couple of years. And, it takes a while for word of mouth and credibility for your course material to spread. And, it's like everything else in the fire service. And you know this as well as I do. You can go from hero to zero pretty quick.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it takes forever to get a good reputation, and all it takes is one screw up and it's done, and you're back to square one.
I think it's the aspect of vetting who you're coming in is important, because like you said, you need to get the experience. And that was one of the things too on my groundwork side of it, was making sure that I laid the groundwork for you, so it was a little bit easier when people were like, all right, so who's Larry DiCamillo? And so
Right.
like, because that was the important thing, because the other side of it is I've seen where people have organizations have brought in phenomenal instructors, and for some reason, the best way that I can put it is that like the people in the class just want to be dicks to them. And like
Yeah.
there's, I mean, yeah, like if there's something that you've never heard of before, or you just think is absolutely dangerous, like if you were here like, hey, you don't need any protection when you go inside, just put that air pack on, your station uniform will be fine. I would be like, yeah, no, I think we're done here, right? But like,
Right.
be open. It's lunchtime. No,
Uh,
be open to what the instructor has to say, because like just like you've have instructors who can be negative. The students, if you're not open for it, you're wasting their time, you're wasting your time, and you're wasting the department's money for what they have spent on having this person come in.
yeah, but I also think though, if you're a professional and you go in there, is you're always going to have that one or two in a group.
Yeah,
Happens every time. And if you're a professional and you're there to provide a service, at the end of the day, your job is to get them from being anti to neutral to, buying in. And so if you're a professional and you know what you're talking about, and if you're in there, you can sway those people. And usually within the first hour or two, like I didn't like Jason when I first saw him. I'm like, okay, here's a loudmouth. But at the same time too,
a
and we
completely
talk.
honest and accurate description, by the way. No,
But no, I mean, but now, I mean, he and I text probably once every couple of weeks now, just seeing what's up, because it's one of those things where we talk during a break and we establish a rapport, and I think he was doing that validation of, do I know what I'm talking about, and at the same time too, I'm doing the validation of, is this the guy that kind of dictates the mood and the attitude, and if you're a professional, you can pick those people out, and I think that's part of it too. My job is not to walk in the door and tell you everything. My job is to show you everything. And then at the end of the day, get you to then do it. And me being on the turntable accomplishes nothing. And so if you'll notice how many times I was on the turntable was hardly at all, because the whole point of the class is to get your people comfortable with operating your equipment for your community. And so me doing it does nothing for them. And so Jason wound up, I mean, I love the guy now. Heck, he wants to come down to Texas and go on vacation. Uh, and, I don't know if we're ready for him yet. But realistically, that's what I think between Mark and I, we were able to do, and I also think it's important that, when you go to a department like yours, that you don't come in there as a one trick pony. That's why I usually bring Mark. Mark is able to offer some complementary perspectives. Plus, Mark has different experiences than I do. So if I'm only 70% and he brings the other 30, beautiful. Or vice versa. He's 70 and I'm 30. When we go and we work with mid-mount departments of a certain brand, he's the go-to guy because he's got experience working on them. I understand the theories. I understand the rigs. I understand how to set them up, but he can actually talk through scenarios and actual incidents where he used them in a certain way. And so there's a huge benefit to that. That's where I think a lot of companies, that go out, I consider the modern fireground training environment in two spheres. You have the lecture circuit, where those guys are extremely good. They're subject matter experts, typically on topics of leadership, tactics, that kind of thing. And then you've got the hands-on component. Those are the guys that are doing the gap set force. Those are the guys that are doing, two guys off the top of my head, Matt Paglione with Boogie Down Truck Work and Dan McCauley with Alarm of Fire. Those two guys, when it comes to VES or ventilation and that kind of stuff, I mean, they're the gold standard. So you've got those two spheres, and unfortunately, I think that right now, it's not a one instructor deal.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of cooperation between companies. I've done work for other companies under their banner, and I appreciate the opportunity for it. And I pick up something every time. And anytime as an instructor, you go someplace and you think that you're not learning something also, then it's time to just call it good and take it to the house, because I can always pick up something. Y'all's truck scared the hell out of me when I saw him. You and I were talking at the fire training field, and they start rotating to the short jack side, and I'm like, what the hell? And I'm like, whoa, stop! And the aerial's letting them do it.
Yeah.
But again, that was just a lack of familiarity of that particular device. And so as soon as I wrapped my head around that, then we were gold for the rest of the class. So it's those things. So I learned something new. So it's about establishing relationships and a two-way flow of communications to really have that good rapport between who you're supposed to be instructing to and who's supposed to be taking the instruction.
Yeah, and I think the compliment of, like you talked about, Mark, we had we have all of the things for rope rescue equipment, like for low angle, and Mark, with his rescue experience, is able to this has been a struggle of mine when I was the MTO and even now as a deputy, and Mark, simply how he put it to the membership for when we were doing that scenario of getting somebody out below grade with the aerial,
Mm-hmm.
like he sparked a fire, and now I have self-motivated firefighters because it was almost like he gave them permission and said, no, you have this stuff, you can do it, you've got it. And
Yeah.
now we are, yes, we're going to make some mistakes along the way, but we're making them because we're actually doing it, which was something that we weren't going to do before. And now, like, Mark's like going to be this official mascot of Fairview because he's he really did kick this spark off, as secondary in this training that we got
Sure.
on our aerial devices.
If you recall, the Stokes basket wasn't even going to be part of the course.
Right.
But it was one of those things when we were going below grade. I think Mark said, okay, well, how do we get him out now? And they said, well, what do you have on the truck? Next thing you know, a Stokes basket comes off.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. And then you got rope. Okay, cool. You got any webbing? Yeah. You got deep, carabiners? Cool. And then at that point, that's just a hasty setup. And granted, it wasn't a full-blown Stokes basket in terms of, having a brake tube or a brake bar or some way to let out and take up slack. And it was essentially a crane evolution. But the reason he went down that path, first of all, he's one of our USAR guys, and he eats that TRT stuff up. And so, he, plus with his background and his experience, he was able to say, look, we're only going to use whatever's on this truck right now.
Yeah.
You still got a patient down there. You got to get him up. And so I'm not going to say it gives permission, as you put it, but it opens guys' eyes up to there are ways to achieve the objective if you're willing to understand what you carry. And if you don't know what you carry, then you probably shouldn't be on that fire truck. And so realistically, they said, yeah, we got webbing, we got this, we got beaners. Okay, cool. Boom, boom, boom. Next thing you know, Stokes basket's going over the side, going down to the patient.
Yeah, it was amazing. Well, Larry, I thank you for coming on and to talk
Sure.
about this experience and everything. Is there anything else that we missed that we want to get out? Do you need to plug anything that's coming up that you're going to be at that you're excited about?
Yeah, Seaside's going to be down. We actually will be down November 11th through the 15th in McAllen, Texas. We're doing McAllen, Farr, Weslaco, Edinburgh, and Mission fire departments, plus the Borderland Fools. We're doing a 3 day truck class for forcible entry, VES, apparatus positioning, uh, as well as just basic ground ladders. And Boogie Down, Paglione is going to be joining us down there. And so we're really looking forward to that class. Chief Gloria in McAllen kind of spearheaded that, and Captain Bustamante in Farr. So we're looking forward to that. And then we've got some other things that are pending right now that we're trying to firm up. But no, we're looking forward to it. It's going to be an exciting time.
And we're going to see you at Joey D.
Yeah, actually. Oh yeah, let me tell you about that plane ride. Steve, myself, and Mo Davis are all on the same flight to Long Island. So what could possibly go wrong?
I don't know, but I know
A
Mo would
lot.
fix it. It'll be really hilarious, and
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, actually, yeah, we're coming up to 31st. Looking forward to that. I think that's going to be a real good opportunity for an excellent cause. All three of us have been really involved down with the one down here in Texas, and this will be my first trip up to the original in New York. So I'm looking forward to seeing that and what they have to offer and supporting a good cause.
yeah, the Joey D. Bernardo Memorial Foundation's doing. They do two training events now, one in Suffolk County and another in Texas called the Lone Star Edition. And the funds go to getting personal safety systems or bailout systems for firefighters. In memory of Joey D. Bernardo, one of the firefighters who was involved in the Black Sunday incident, and to hear the story of his life and his legacy is something, and to see his dad like still leading the cause is just
Oh,
it's a
Chief, yeah.
motivational thing.
Oh, to listen to Chief D talk, I could listen to him talk for days, and just his experiences and his passion for keeping his son's name going on with the good cause is just absolutely phenomenal. And what Kevin Yost has done to keep it
Yeah,
going, and all those legends, and I'll be honest with you, I never thought about them. It was one of those things, we're big, tough firemen, but being a part of the Joey D in Texas for the last 3 or 4 years, it's really opened my eyes up. And we're actually going through the process now of acquiring bailout kits for all of our people. We've narrowed down the manufacturer we want to use. We've done some in-service training with them. And what matter of fact, we just cut the PO for the first order a week or
that's
so ago.
awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, Larry, I'll do the outro here, and then
I guess we'll
just
see you in New York.
yeah, and stick around for a couple seconds after we
Yeah.
stop recording. But everybody, this is Rob, Frontline Mindset with National Fire Radio, Chief Larry DiCamillo, talking about Seaside Consultants, everything under the sun about aerial operations today, with bringing them in as a consultant and what you need to be looking out for. We will see you guys out there. Stay safe, and thank you for tuning in.